My stepdaughter humiliated me after her biological father returned, so I told her, "You were just a burden all these years," and I left the house for good. I am a 42-year-old man. I have been married to my wife Clara, who is 40, for over a decade. When I met her, she was already the mother of a little girl, Camila, who was only 5 years old at the time. From the very first moment we met, I felt a special affection for the girl. She wasn't my biological daughter, but over time she became a fundamental part of my life. The story I'm going to tell here is about what recently happened in our family, an event that shook everything we had built. To explain it properly, I need to go back to how it all started, because without context it would seem like what happened was sudden or senseless, and it wasn't. When I met Clara, she told me from the beginning that she was a single mother. She told me that Camila's father, a man named Javier, had left when the girl was just a few months old. Apparently, he couldn't handle the idea of being a father so young. They were around 24 years old when it happened, and he disappeared without explanation, without taking responsibility, without contributing financially, without even calling on birthdays or important dates. He literally washed his hands of everything. Clara told me she expected nothing from him and didn't want to talk much about the subject. Her family knew the story, and everyone had resigned themselves to the fact that Javier wouldn't return. The girl grew up without any memories of her father, because whatever a baby remembers from a few months old doesn't stay in the memory. So, in practice, for Camila, her father was a stranger. I entered both of their lives when Camila was 5 years old. At first, I admit it scared me to take on that role. It's not easy to get involved with someone who already has a child, because it's not just the relationship with your partner, it's also with that child who depends on the adults. If you don't do it right, you can end up hurting them. But I truly wanted to be with Clara, and the idea of forming a family excited me. The first months were a period of adjustment. Camila treated me with some distance, as is normal for a young child who doesn't know if that person will be permanent in their life. I tried not to force anything, just to be there, to play with her, to take her to the park, to help with basic things. Little by little, she began to trust me. She told me I was her friend, and after a while, she started calling me Dad on her own initiative. That moment marked a before and after in my life. I didn't ask her to call me that, nor did I hint at it. It was her decision, and it filled me with emotion. From then on, I took on the role of father with all my strength. I took her to her first day of school, went to her festivals, was there when she got sick, taught her to ride a bike, helped her with homework. Everything a father does, I did. When I married Clara, Camila was our flower girl. She was 8 years old, and I remember that day she hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Now you're really my dad." I cried like never before. It was the best gift they could give me. The years passed and our life was calm. Like in all families, there were ups and downs, financial problems, stressful moments, but we were always united. My relationship with Camila grew and strengthened. In adolescence, we had clashes like any father with a teenage daughter, but we always found a way to fix it. I saw her as my daughter without any distinction. So much so that I even started the legal adoption process. It wasn't easy because even though Javier didn't appear, he was still legally the father. We had to wait, go through procedures, and finally they granted me shared custody with Clara. That day I felt that officially I was what I had already been in practice for many years, her father. Up to here, everything would seem like the story of an ordinary family, with its normal complications. But what happened next changed everything. A few months ago, when Camila turned 20, Javier came back. I don't know what prompted him, because there were no prior signs. He appeared out of nowhere after 15 years of giving no trace. Not a message, not a call, nothing. One day he simply wrote to Clara saying he wanted to see his daughter. At first we thought it was a joke. How could someone disappear during their daughter's entire childhood and adolescence, and suddenly when she's already a woman, want to show up as if nothing had happened. Clara got very angry. She responded harshly, telling him he had no right, that it was too late, that he couldn't expect Camila to welcome him with open arms after so much abandonment. I shared that feeling. For me, Javier was a stranger, someone who had done absolutely nothing for the girl. But what we didn't anticipate was Camila's reaction. When she found out that her biological father had appeared, she didn't get angry as we thought. On the contrary, she seemed curious, even excited. She told me she wanted to meet him, that she needed answers, that she couldn't just ignore that she had a blood father who now wanted to talk to her. I tried to warn her carefully that it might be an illusion, that she could get hurt if she expected too much. But she replied that it was something she had to do for herself. I didn't understand it completely. It's not easy for a child to live with a father's absence. Even though I had always been there, and even though our bond was strong, the biological absence leaves unanswered questions. Why did he leave? Why didn't he call? What was more important than being with his daughter? Camila needed to know, and I couldn't compete with that. The day she met him, she came back different. I noticed in her eyes that something had changed. She told me that Javier had apologized, that he explained he was immature back then, that he wasn't ready to be a father, that he got scared and ran away. He told her he had always thought about her, that he never stopped loving her, but that he hadn't felt capable of facing it. To me, those words sounded like excuses, but for Camila they were a balm. She told me she understood his reasons, that everyone makes mistakes, and that she wanted to give him a chance. I said nothing because I knew that if I tried to oppose it, the only thing I'd achieve was for her to shut down with me. Little by little, Javier started having more presence in her life. He called her, invited her out, brought her gifts. I watched it and felt a mix of rage and helplessness. For 15 years he did nothing, and now he arrived with flowers and nice words to win over his daughter, as if the past could be erased with a few gestures. Clara was also angry, but in the end she decided not to interfere. She told me that Camila was an adult, that she had the right to decide whether or not to have a relationship with her biological father. I knew that, but it didn't make it hurt any less. I began to notice a change in my relationship with Camila. Before, she told me everything, asked for my advice, hugged me. Now she talked to me less, hid things from me, preferred to spend time with Javier. It hurt me deeply because I felt like I was losing my daughter. One day I confronted her. I asked her if something was wrong, if I had done something to make her pull away. She told me coldly that she needed space, that she wanted to get to know her real father, and that I should understand it. That phrase pierced me like a knife. Her real father? I had been there her whole life, I had given everything for her, I had sacrificed things, I had worked so she wouldn't lack anything, and suddenly she told me I wasn't the real father. From then on, our relationship deteriorated. We started arguing frequently. I tried to explain to her that Javier didn't deserve so much forgiveness, that he had abandoned her, that facts aren't erased with words. But she accused me of being jealous, of not letting her grow, of wanting to take away her chance to have her biological father. I felt like I had been erased from her story. Everything I had done seemed not to matter. And the worst part was that I couldn't do anything because the more I tried to get closer, the more she pulled away. The arguments with Camila had become routine. She defended Javier with an enthusiasm that seemed almost ridiculous to me, as if the simple fact that they shared blood erased 20 years of absence. I tried to stay calm, but deep down my blood boiled seeing how she downplayed me and exalted him. One Saturday she had plans to meet her father. She was radiant, dressed carefully, and came down the stairs with a smile I hadn't seen on her in a long time. She waited for hours. She kept checking her phone, stood up, sat back down. The hope in her eyes slowly faded, until finally she accepted the reality. Javier wasn't coming. Not a message, not a call, nothing. She went up to her room in silence. I gave her some time, but then I went to see her. Camila, I said, do you see now? That man isn't worth it. You should stop idealizing him. He's nothing more than an acquaintance, a stranger who chose to disappear. She looked at me with red eyes, full of contained rage. You don't understand. His paternal instinct brought him back to me. Do you know how much I suffered from not having a father? You'll never understand that. I grew up saying I had a stepfather, nothing more. That word, stepfather, pierced me like hot iron, but I didn't let her notice. Do you really think you didn't have a father? I shot back. And all the times I was with you? When I took you to the park, when I taught you to ride a bike, when I went to your school. Does that not count? She frowned, and with a coldness that chilled me, she replied, you were just Mom's boyfriend. Some random guy I liked. But he's my blood. I'm his blood. I felt an explosion of rage. She looked at me as if I were nothing, as if all those years of sleepless nights, expenses, care, and sacrifices had been invisible. And then I let out what I had been holding in for a long time. You know what? You're right. Let him pay for your things. Let him take care of you. Because in the end, you're not my daughter. You were just a burden I had to support to be able to sleep with your mother. Silence was absolute. She looked at me with a distraught face, breaking into tears. I stood there, certain that those words were exactly what she needed to hear. They were cruel, yes, but she had reduced me to a random guy. If she was going to despise what I had done, let her feel the edge of the truth too. At that moment, Clara appeared at the door. What did you just say? She shouted at me with a fury I had rarely seen in her. Camila was crying uncontrollably, repeating through sobs that she had always suspected it. I knew you didn't love me, I knew it. Get out of here, Clara shouted at me. Right now. I didn't argue. I calmly packed my things without rushing. While Camila cried in her mother's arms, I left the room with a firm step. Clara caught up with me in the hallway. Don't ever come back. Don't worry, I replied coldly. I already did what I had to do. I closed the house door behind me. Outside, the cool night air hit my face. I felt no guilt or regret. I knew my words had been harsh, even cruel, but they were also necessary. She needed to understand that parents are not defined by blood, but by what they do. And if she wanted to ignore that, then she deserved to hear what she heard. I got in the car and lit a cigarette. I looked toward the house window. The light in Camila's room was still on. I could imagine her tears, Clara's comfort, the rage against me. But I felt nothing. After 20 years, it had become clear where my place was in that family, outside. And I accepted it without trembling. Update. The days following that argument were strange. For years I had carried responsibilities that weren't mine, and in the end all I received was contempt. I wasn't going to let them keep humiliating me. I prepared everything for the divorce. I spoke with a lawyer, gathered the necessary papers, and in a few days the process was underway. Clara didn't take long to respond to the petition, and it was clear she was as determined as I was to cut ties completely. It hurt, of course, because I had shared more than a decade of my life with her. But I also knew that relationship had deteriorated long before Javier returned. Her silence in the face of Camila's slights was enough for me to realize that, for her, my place had never been fully secure. The first thing I did was cut off the expenses. I stopped paying Camila's tuition and the house bills. There was no point in continuing to support a home from which I had been thrown out like a stranger. I had to set boundaries even if it sounded cruel. A few days of calm passed. I moved into a small apartment, barely with the essentials. Living alone again after so many years was a strange feeling. Absolute silence, no laughter, no arguments, no one to wait for at dinner. At times I thought about calling them, asking how they were, but I stopped myself. I had decided not to turn back. One afternoon I received a call. The number looked familiar. I answered and heard her voice. It was Camila. "Hi," she said in an unsure tone. "It's me. I wanted to talk to you." I stayed silent for a few seconds. I didn't expect that call so soon. "Tell me," I replied coldly. "I wanted to say you were right," she began. "Javier hasn't contacted me again. He doesn't answer my messages. I don't know where he is. I thought he had come back to stay, but he disappeared again." Her voice broke. I closed my eyes and sighed. It didn't surprise me. In fact, I always knew that would happen. "I want to apologize for what happened," she continued. I was hurt, confused. I said things I shouldn't have. For a few seconds I felt a slight tremor in my chest. It was the first time she acknowledged that she had hurt me with her words. But I decided not to show weakness. "Sure," I replied with a sarcastic tone. "Now you're coming for the substitute father, right?" "Don't say that," she pleaded. "Listen to me carefully, Camila. You're not a little girl anymore. You're 20 years old and it's time you mature. You should learn to be grateful to those who actually help you. All this time I was your father, even if you didn't share my blood. But I'm not going to stay in a place where I'm humiliated and treated like a stranger." On the other end of the line I heard her crying. "Dad, forgive me. You're my real dad. I was a fool, blind. Please come back. Come back, Daddy." Her voice hit me hard. That word, Daddy, stirred something deep inside me. For an instant I felt my heart soften. I wanted to cry. I thought about the years we shared, about when she was little and ran to me with open arms, about her childish drawings where I always appeared. I stayed silent, pressing the phone to my ear. I was about to give in. But then she kept talking. At least give me some money for tuition. They already notified me that you stopped paying." That's when it all ended. I felt the little tenderness that had awakened extinguish abruptly. I understood that the call hadn't been out of sincere regret, but out of need. She was looking for me only because she needed the money. I smiled bitterly. "Now I understand everything," I told her in a low voice. "You didn't call because you consider me your father. You called because you need me to keep paying your bills." "That's not true," she shouted through tears. "I swear it's not about that." "Enough, Camila. Don't lie to me." And I hung up. I turned off the phone and left it on the table. I sat in the armchair, staring at the wall in silence. I felt no sadness, no guilt. I felt a kind of bitter peace, like someone who finally confirms what they always suspected, that I had never been enough. In that moment I knew the story was over. There was no turning back. The following days were calm. The divorce process moved quickly without major complications. Clara and I signed the papers without arguing. She was serious, distant, as if she also wanted to close that chapter as soon as possible. I kept my things and my freedom. They continued with their lives. Today I can say it without hesitation. I am divorced and have no relationship whatsoever with Camila. I don't talk to her, I don't ask about her. I'm not interested in knowing if Javier appeared again or disappeared forever. It's no longer my problem. For years I considered her my daughter, I cared for her, supported her, gave her everything I could. But she preferred to give the title of father to a man who abandoned her before she could say her first words. That was her mistake. And I'm not going to bear the consequences. Many might say I was cruel, that I should have had more patience, that the wounds of an abandoned child are deep and hard to heal. But there's a limit to everything. And I'm not going to stay where I'm not valued. It may sound cold, but I learned an important lesson. Love, no matter how genuine, needs reciprocity. If there's no gratitude, no recognition, it becomes a burden. And I'm no longer willing to carry anyone else. Today I live alone, with the peace of knowing I said what I had to say and made the decisions I had to make. Sometimes, at night, I think about her, about what our relationship could have been if she had known how to value what she had. But those thoughts last only a few seconds. I pour myself a drink, look out the window, and move forward. Camila stopped being my daughter the day she called me a random guy. And even though she later tried to take it back, it was too late. Because in this world there's something that never returns: broken trust. Now I am a free man, divorced, with no children, no ties. The loneliness may weigh on me at times, but I prefer that to staying in a place where I'm not valued. And if one day Camila understands what she lost, it will be her burden, not mine.